what's going on, APUSH peeps? We have chapter 31 of America's history for you today. This is it. Last chapter. You should be very proud of yourselves for making it this far. And you should be very prepared for the exam, which will be here soon. All right, so two terms to know when we're talking about America and the global economy. Globalization, that is interdependence or connection between countries and businesses. And we'll see a huge increase in trade. And this is really going to happen since the 1970s, 80s, but especially the 1990s. The World Trade Organization is an organization that regulates trade between nations, and that's an example of international trade between two or more nations. European Union is made up of dozens of countries from Europe, and they have a common currency called the euro. And the Chinese economy has grown significantly since 2000. We see there are elements of capitalism within the Communist Party, and a major theme of the 2016 election was, in fact, China and the outsourcing of jobs to China, or the fact that China can produce materials much more cheaply than American factories. Okay, the group G8, or the group of eight, they are countries that control most financial organizations, including the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. Definitely no Nafta. I could see Nafta being a stimulus question on the multiple choice portion of your exam. This stands for the North American Free Trade Agreement. And what this means is there are no tariffs on trade between U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And here are the leaders from those countries when NAFTA got rolling. You'll notice that it's George H.W. Bush. Bill Clinton will actually sign NAFTA, but it gets started under George H.W. Bush. Multinational corporations, these are businesses that operate in many countries. Think of businesses like Walmart or Amazon or Apple or pretty much anything you can think of today. And many banks and other financial institutions saw their industry significantly deregulate. That was a trend that began under Ronald Reagan. Remember when he ran for president in 1980, he wanted deregulation. The 1990s saw the growth of PCs and the internet. I remember my first family computer connected to the internet was 1996, and we had AOL, and you had to pay by the hour. It was insane. And you also had the rise of e-commerce. My favorite business, Amazon. By 2040 and 2050, the U.S. will become known as a majority-minority nation, meaning that there will not be a single racial or ethnic group that is the majority. Immigration is a common theme throughout U.S. history. Between 1970 and 2000, 28 million immigrants came to the United States, in large part due to the Immigration Nationality Act of 1965 under LBJ. Remember, this eliminated the quota system from the 1920s. So those really severely restricted quotas, which are specifically mentioned in the curriculum, are now gone. Immigrants with skills and high demand could more easily come to the United States as a result of this act, and immediate family members of legal immigrants could come to America more easily. So this is going to encourage immigration from family members and those with skills and high demand. And many, many, many immigrants are going to send money back home to their families that are still at the country from which they came. The emergence of the New Right, or a conservative movement, and the New Right focuses on marriage between a man and a woman. They would not be in favor of same-sex marriage. The New Right would also be anti-abortion, and this is a major distinction between Democrats and Republicans. Now, generally speaking, this is not always 100% true, but Democrats tend to be pro-choice, Republicans tend to be pro-life. And since Roe v. Wade in 1973, you'll hear every once in a while on the news about organized protests outside abortion clinics. So this is still one of the most controversial decisions in society today. When we're talking about gay rights, the Defense of Marriage Act, which was passed in the 1990s, this allowed states not to recognize same-sex marriage. This was overturned by the Supreme Court a couple years ago in 2013. Webster versus Reproductive Health Services from 1989 stated that states could limit funds for abortion, and Planned Parenthood versus Casey allows states to require a 24-hour waiting period before an abortion is performed. Jumping on over to the Clinton presidency, since the 1990s, political parties have become more polarized or less willing to compromise. In the 1990s, you see the growth of cable news, which is huge today. And Clinton defeated Bush and Ross Perot, an independent, in the 1992 election. Clinton pushed for universal health care, which was also spearheaded by his wife, Hillary Rodham Clinton. In 1998, we have a balanced budget for the first time in many, many years. And Newt Gingrich, the Speaker of the House, he became very well known in the 1990s with his contract with America, which called for tax cuts, reduction in welfare, and government regulations. And this is a theme that we still see 20 plus years later. Now, we know in the late 1990s, Clinton was impeached. Impeachment does not mean removed. Remember, it means that you have charges brought against you. And here is the actual impeachment trial. He was charged with perjury and obstruction of justice. Most Americans, they opposed impeachment. 58% were against it, and about 38% favored it. Clinton, like Andrew Johnson, was not removed from office. Although they both were impeached, neither one of them were removed. NATO is going to expand rapidly in the 1990s and including up to today, including former Soviet-controlled countries such as Poland. And this will upset Russia because countries that used to be under their control are now members of NATO. In the early 1990s, we see the breakup of the country of Yugoslavia. Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence in 1992, and a dictator by the name of Slobodan Milosevic, he's committed genocide or ethnic cleansing, which led to NATO bombings in the 90s. By 2008, 7 countries were around from former Yugoslavia. Now, after the Persian Gulf War, America is going to leave some troops in Saudi Arabia, and this is going to upset many people in the Middle East. In 1993, we have the first World Trade Center bombing in the parking lot underneath the World Trade Center, in which 6 people were killed and over 1,000 more were injured. U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were bombed in 1998, so we see a rise of terrorism in the 1990s. And the USS Cole, a ship in 2000, was bombed when another ship ran into it, and it put a crater in the ship. These attacks were committed by Al-Qaeda. George W. Bush is going to become president in the 2000 election, where he will run against Vice President Al Gore. Gore won the popular vote, but Bush won the electoral vote. So again, we've seen this happen throughout American history, in which the winner of the popular vote does not always become president. The Supreme Court intervened in the recount efforts in Florida. Florida was a huge question. Whoever won Florida would win the presidency, and there's a recount, and Bush ends up suing Gore to stop the recount, and the Supreme Court sides with Bush. He's going to implement tax cuts, the Economic Growth and Tax Relief Act. This will decrease income and estate taxes, similar to the Reagan tax cuts. Federal spending will increase, and Medicare and Medicaid, this is uncontrollable spending. The idea that this spending is going to continue to increase at uncontrollable rates. September 11th, 2001, 19 terrorists are going to hijack 4 planes. 2 will crash into the World Trade Center, killing thousands, and 1 crashed into the Pentagon. The 4th plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania after the people on board retook control of the plane and crashed it before it could crash into another building. Most likely, people believe it was meant for the White House. In October of 2001, a month later, the U.S. fought the Taliban in Afghanistan for hiding Osama bin Laden. They refused to turn him over. He was the leader of Al-Qaeda and the architect of the 9/11 attacks. The Patriot Act is passed shortly after 9/11, and this will increase the government's power to monitor Americans. They can monitor Americans without always having a search warrant. Remember, please remember, this is a theme of the course. During times of war, personal liberties decrease. You see this with habeas corpus being suspended by Lincoln during the Civil War, or Japanese internment during World War II, or Schenck versus the United States in World War I. During times of war, personal liberties decrease. And here's a map illustrating the Japanese internment. The U.S. is going to invade Iraq in 2003 without a UN resolution, and the argument will be that Iraq was associated with terrorism and had weapons of mass destruction, and neither one of those was found to be true. In 2004, there was a prison scandal in which pictures and videos showed American guards torturing and abusing suspected terrorists, and this made worldwide headlines. The 2004 election saw Bush versus John Kerry, who becomes Secretary of State under President Obama's second term. Kerry was portrayed as a flip-flopper for his position on the Iraq War. He was in favor of it, then he was against it, and Bush's team really jumped on that and portrayed him as somebody who could not make up his mind. 11 states at this time passed bans on same-sex marriage, which will be overturned by the Supreme Court later on. Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans, killing more than 2,000 people, and the effects are still felt today of the damage from Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And in 2008, the stock market tumbled. Unemployment reached 10%, which was very, very high, the highest it's been in many, many years. The Great Recession, as it is now known as, also saw housing prices plummet. A lot of people were buying houses with mortgages that they could not afford. So let's talk about the Obama presidency. Obama focused on an economic stimulus package. One of the first things he did when he came to office was that he also pushed for health care and Wall Street regulation. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act provided $787 billion to states for projects. So to try to get the country out of this recession. That could be tied to like a New Deal program or something that FDR would have done, this government spending to get the economy going. The Tea Party, or Tax Enough Party, begins to emerge, and this was a right-wing group that was critical of large government and Obama's healthcare plans. They favored less government. And in 2011, Obama repealed the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which allowed gays to openly serve in the military. This repeal did. And Sonia Sotomayor was the first Latina on the Supreme Court appointed by Obama. The Arab Spring is protests that led to the downfall of several regimes in the Middle East. And in May 2011, SEAL Team 6 killed Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Here is a picture of the compound that he was hiding at. Climate change has been a major issue of the 2000s, and the impacts of higher temperatures are higher sea levels, agricultural difficulties. Kyoto Protocol, this was a treaty to limit carbon emissions, and the U.S. is not a signee. And Obama's victories were based on an electorate that was multicultural, young, and many female. So a possible electoral shift that we could see. All right, time for a quick recap. No globalization in Nafta. Impacts of new technology, especially computers. NATO, that it's still adding members. Immigration laws of 1965 and 86. Holy cow, no, both of them, please. Supreme Court and abortion. What has it ruled? Gay rights. What are some examples of that? Newt Gingrich's contract with America, terrorism since 1993, tax cuts under Bush, 9/11 in the war in Afghanistan, also know the Iraq War, and reasons for the emergence of the Tea Party. All right, guys, I will not see you back here for another chapter because we are done. Congratulations. You should be very, very proud of yourself. Best of luck on the exam, and don't ever forget you are more than a test score. It does not define who you are as a human being. Your worth is much more than a test score. Thank you for sticking with me. I appreciate it, and have a good day.